also of the Oregonian. And we're going to talk, of course, about the Blazers. The first topic we're going to talk about, I'm going to give you a list first before we dive into it. The first one's going to be about how this team is finding moral victories and barely losing to yet another winning team. They are now 2-5 in their last 7 games, with 4 blowout losses to winning teams, and then the close 116-115 loss to Boston on Tuesday night. We're going to talk about that. Also, we saw some good Nurkic. We saw the Bosnian beast starting to emerge from his lair, looking like he's going to try and do some damage the rest of the way. But can he get his minutes up from 25 per game into 30-minute range? That would really help this team out. Also, the defense, still bad. Will it ever be good? I want to dive into the personnel and why I think it's more personnel than stats. I don't want to get too, I don't think we're going to debate the stats versus personnel thing, but I'm at least going to show you based on analytics sites that the personnel is bad defensively. Last but not least, all of this losing badly to good teams and Lillard getting shut down by some of these good teams. Is he killing his chances at winning the MVP? That will be our final topic. But first, Joe, last night, Boston lost. Jason Tatum nails a 3 with 7.8 left to give the Celtics a 4-point lead. Blazers can't recover. Celtics win 116-115. But after the game, this was the least upset I've seen a team be in the postgame. Stotts, Lillard, Carmelo all put a positive spin on it, talked about progress. They didn't get blown out. They changed some things on offense. They had 31 assists, which was a team high. They felt good about themselves, all things considered. Yes, they didn't like the fact that they lost, but still, I thought they were relying a lot on some moral victories in that game. What did you think about their performance and about their attitude following the loss?
Well, before we get too deep in that, let me be the first to publicly congratulate you for getting your second COVID shot today. I shall give you some golf claps there. Yeah,
I appreciate it. You've had one, right?
I've had one, so I'm one behind you. I'm getting there. We'll be there in a couple weeks, but
then we can hang
congratulations.
Out.
Yeah,
hang
we can do an in-person live video cast.
Live from Bi-Mart and/or Fred Meyer.
Yeah, I'll have a glass of CJ's wine, and you could have a
juice box,
a Coke, or whatever it is you drink. Look, I think when we did this last Aaron a couple weeks ago, I believe I said that I kind of expected the Blazers to kind of have a few growing pains to deal with some rough waters here as they worked CJ McCollum back, as they worked Nurkic back, as they kind of learn to play with Norman Powell, who they just acquired. But this is not what I expected. And no. You can't
starters with 5 minutes to go.
You can't just get rolled by good teams night in and night out. And it's one thing to be 1-8 versus teams above you in the West and 7-16 versus winning teams overall. It's another thing to give up a 47-point first quarter to the Clippers, to get outscored 40-19 in a do or die third against the Jazz, and just to get run out of the gym against these teams was concerning. And I've been pretty bullish on this team, I think, hard-headedly so all season. And I just keep waiting for them to turn the corner, and it's just not happening. And they're running out of time. I think they have 18 games left, right?
Correct.
14 against winning teams, and that's not including San Antonio, who their Spurs are right there at 500, so that conceivably could be 16 of 18. And it's something has to change, and something has to change fast. Now, that said, I guess if you're scraping for moral victories in April, then Tuesday night's performance against the Celtics was a good sign. They didn't get steamrolled. And it was a rare instance when they didn't deliver in the clutch, because before Jason Tatum hit that ludicrous shot that you mentioned, Dame kind of missed a quick pull-up mid-range shot there. I think they were going for a 2-for-1 late in the game, and rather than draw something up and get a good look, he kind of just shot something quick, and so that was a rare fail for him. So, the secret sauce that they've used, keeping games close and winning late didn't come through, but as we'll talk about later, it was nice to see Nurkic kind of have a resurgent performance, or at least, show signs that he might awake from his slumber. And I think they played better in spurts on defense. They played better generally team basketball overall, as you mentioned, the 31 assists. But I got to see more than a close loss against a good team before I can, get behind this team right now.
So when they came back from the road trip where they beat Miami without Jimmy Butler and without Oladipo did not play in Portland either, and Goran Dragic was out in that game. So they beat Miami, beat Orlando, beat Toronto, beat Detroit. Miami wouldn't be a playoff team without Butler and Dragic. Orlando, Toronto, Detroit, not playoff teams this year. There were a couple of people telling me, "Oh, they're looking pretty good. They just won 4 in a row. They're 11 games over 500." And I said, "Get back to me in 2 weeks." It's been 2 weeks. The reason why I said that is because I saw Milwaukee, Clippers, Utah, Miami, and Boston coming up. I didn't think they lose all 5 of them. But as I told you, I thought from that point on, Milwaukee on, I thought they were going to be under 500. Right now, they're 2-5. But yeah, it's the way they're losing. They weren't even in those games. Even the Miami game, they lost by 9. They were down 20 when they pulled everybody. And so Simons, Giles, Nasir Little got them to within 9. So it wasn't the starter. So they have been rocked 4 times and did not look good on defense, did not look good on offense. Teams are trapping Lillard. They're blitzing Lillard. They're definitely trying to say, we don't want Lillard to beat us. The rest of the team is not necessarily responding when that happens. So what I will say from the Boston game is that we did see a shift a little bit. Stotts wouldn't, and I don't have the numbers on this. It seemed like they were running less straight up pick and roll. They definitely were running Dame off screens and even having him set screens. They were trying to figure out different ways to move the ball around and get shots rather than have Dame or CJ go one-on-one a lot like sometimes they like to do, or just jack up, threes, et cetera, et cetera. And they produced 31 assists. Now, if they can continue to play like that, and also Nurkic, who we will get to, had 7 of those assists, which I thought was fascinating because he was being a facilitator, a big man getting the ball, and then you have Powell, CJ, and Dame running around, and even Covington. You can find those guys for good shots. So I thought offensively they showed a different look, which was good. And Dame talked about how they've played that way in the past before, so it wasn't necessarily new for them. So we'll see if they can continue to do that because it makes it tougher to double team Damian Lillard. Defensively, I thought it was the same old thing. Like I still think they're always going to have trouble against guys with length. Jason Tatum 6'8", Brown 6'6". One of the 3 guards is going to be on those 2 guys. It's just math, right? So what do you do with that matchup? You get torched. It's just inevitable. So there were positives, but still they lost. And they lost to a team that's barely above 500. Boston's not that great. They're not 38-18. They're 28-26. So to me, it's still a major red flag. And I see a lot more losses coming because I just think they have too many issues on defense and size issues that are going to hold them back against good teams. And most of these good teams have great length.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, as you mentioned, it's concerning the way that they've lost by just not even being close in some of these games. But even more than that, it was eye-raising to hear some of their comments after some of these losses. To hear Damian Lillard say that the team needed to look itself in the mirror, and Nurkic essentially saying they needed to hold each other accountable. This is a stretch run, and we're still hearing, key players say that about the team. And that, I think, is most concerning of all, that at this stage of the game, that they're still here and that they find themselves in this position. Now, some of it, I guess, could be explained away from all their injuries. Obviously, missing CJ and Nurkic for the majority of the season has, had huge ramifications. So it would be unfair not to point that out. But the reality is that that's where the team is. And when you have guys saying those types of things at this stage of the season, it's worrisome.
I agree. I agree. Let me tell you a quick story. When I covered Portland State basketball a long time ago, they had to win a certain amount of games to get into the Big Sky tournament. And they had like 3 home games against beatable teams. And they just got smoked. And after every game, every player I talked to was like, "Oh, we just didn't have the urgency. We had to play with the." I'm like, how can you say this every night? What is your problem? What else do you have to do tonight? How are you not? You have to beat Idaho State. What else is on your mind that you didn't bring the urgency? And you see that with teams sometimes when you cover them and they say this. Oh, it's one thing to have that happen every once in a while, but over and over and over and over and over, like these are professional basketball players. If they can't hold each other accountable or themselves accountable, I don't know what Stotts can do because he can't just start yanking and benching guys because you'd have benched CJ or Dame for not hustling on defense. Well, then who are you going to play? Simons, who's got the worst defensive rating on the team. Like, what are you going to do if you're Stotts if the players aren't buying into giving 100% and insisting on being on the same page and holding each other accountable. Nurkic even said, maybe we need to cuss each other out every once in a while or something. And I'm like, yeah, maybe you do. Maybe someone needs to get in someone's face and say, what the bleep are you doing? That's your guy. You're supposed to rotate over there. We've only gone over this 150 times. It's April. Like, maybe they need to do some of that to get off of this run of, oh, we're just not. No, that excuse is over. It's April and you're getting smoked. And if you're not fixing that now, I'm supposed to believe you're going to fix it in the playoffs when a team can zero in on all your weaknesses for 2 weeks and just dissect you? No, they're going to get swept or 4-1. So I'm just tired of hearing it. Every time someone says it, I roll my eyes. Like, oh, that again. So I'm with you on that 100%.
And, I think obviously one of the key figures in all of this, the Blazers' success against good teams or bad teams, their defense, their play overall is not only the play, but the availability of Jusuf Nurkic. And, I think we should probably shift a little bit just towards him. And,
sure.
I guess maybe what could be explained for some of the Blazers' optimism after last night's game was not only finally a resurgent performance from Carmelo Anthony, but was that Jusuf Nurkic kind of started to look like the guy that I think we all thought he could be. And so, I guess I wonder, how do you view where he's at and how did you view what you saw last night?
Well, he said the other night that, he's on this minutes restriction. He's working his way back, but maybe he needs to start being more aggressive offensively to sort of add to the offensive arsenal. And he didn't shoot a lot in this game. He only shot 4 times, but he made 4 of them, and he had a really vicious dunk where he just took it aggressively. And so I like the aggressiveness, 9 rebounds. I love the 7 assists because that shows, okay, he's getting the ball. He's looking for other guys. He's not trying to be selfish offensively. He's trying to make plays. So in 26 minutes, he's on a 25-minute restriction right now. He was on 20. If they can get those types of performances from him, he also had 3 steals over 34, 35 minutes like most marquee centers would give you. I think you're onto something that could actually change the entire dynamic of the team. The problem is he's never played those kind of minutes. He's always been a 29, 30 kind of guy. That would be better than 26, but I almost feel like this team needs him to be playing more 34, 35 in that area to really take advantage of what he brings. What do you think?
I'd like to see him get to 30. And at this point, my man, between the wrist and the knee and the calf and, just coming back from his leg, he's got so many ailments. And
I know.
And you start to wonder, is he ever going to be healthy again? And it's a little unfair because the wrist thing was such a fluke, play that you can watch the video 12 times and you still don't know how he broke his wrist.
Right.
But he is at this point the single biggest, figure in separating whether this team can accomplish what it's set out to do, or if it's going to flame out with another first round loss. It's as plain and simple as that. A healthy Jusuf Nurkic is, I don't want to say everything to this team, but pretty close to it. They are built around Dame and CJ and Nurkic, that big 3. And then they had this depth and versatility around them to kind of get through this COVID season and, have different dimensions at guys. And when you don't have, the most dynamic of the big 3, the only interior presence, the defensive force, I think we're seeing what this team misses without him. And it was encouraging. He had some nice passing and playmaking. He had that nice driving dunk that you said where he got fouled. He's mixing it up a little bit. He's getting chippy Nurkic, talking to officials, talking to, opponents. And so it was good to see that. And I do like that he did a little bit of everything. 8 points, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals. But the number I like most is 26, which was that 26 minutes played. We need to see that get bumped up. We need to see him play consecutive games. And until that happens, I just don't know that we're at any point going to get back to our original topic of if this team can turn the corner, because, as we've talked about so much, he means so much to this team.
Exactly. Now, one note in the whole race part of this thing and how important he's going to be in if they turn things around in the race in the playoffs. Jamal Murray is out for the season with an ACL for Denver. They're in fourth place right now. We'll see how much that hurts them. I imagine it's definitely not going to not hurt them, right? I still feel like Dallas is coming up, and Memphis is playing better too. So Portland has to, like, with all these winning teams they're playing, they have to win some of these games or they are going to fall into the play-in. It's inevitable because, as I've said before, Dallas' schedule is really easy the rest of the way. We'll see what Denver losing Murray means. Maybe that saves Portland from falling into 7th or 8th. But to me, Nurkic getting up to 30, maybe 30-plus minutes, being a 17-9 and 5 guy and a couple blocks and rim protecting is the only thing left that they can say, well, we're still waiting for this. Like, we're waiting for this thing. Everything else, CJ's been back now for a few weeks, and he and Dame together. As a matter of fact, he and Dame together in the starting lineup, I think they have a losing record right now. No, I take that back because they won that 4 in a row. But their record's not that great because I think they were 8-5 when he went out. But, CJ is CJ. Powell has been around now for a couple of weeks. Yes, they can get more synergy, but still, the one thing that still remains is Nurkic. I think he's the key to keeping them out of the play-in round.
And there's a couple things that they need to do too. When Nurkic comes back and he kind of gets to that 30-minute limit, you still have the Cantor Melo problem and the bench defense
That's a
problem.
good point.
So,
yeah.
And there seemed to be a little bit of a wrinkle. I mean, Stotts pulled Nurkic earlier in his shift and put Cantor in, which kind of limited some of that Cantor Melo minutes. And so there's some things that you can do here and there, but the problems do go deeper. But again, Nurkic is the biggest kind of, tipping or building block for that thing. And so I totally agree with you. That's the last thing that they can say. And the last thing standing in their way with 18 games left.
Right. And the other part of the Cantor and Melo situation is that for the month of April before last night, Melo was shooting 28%. He was in a complete funk. And so if he's going out there with Cantor and they're both playing bad defense together and Melo can't shoot and put the ball in the basket, then he's not mitigating some of his defensive problems, which is something Stotts pointed to.
Why do you think Cantor's getting 30 rebounds there? Somebody's got to miss shots for him to get those rebounds.
He got 12 offensive rebounds that night when he got 30. And it's like, well, in part because they could. Well, actually, that game they actually shot well. That was Detroit. So, yeah. But still. Okay, so moving on. Okay, I'm about to go full nerd right here. So there's a lot of talk about the defense, obviously, all season. And there's a lot of people out there who blame Stotts, say he's not a good defensive coach. Maybe he is, maybe he isn't. I know they had a top 10 defense in 2019. Last year, I'm not really going to fault anything on the defense last year. You lost your 2 best big man defenders in Nurkic and Zach Collins. Whiteside had a nice statistical year, but as I didn't watch him as closely as you did, but as you pointed out to me, he is a defensive liability because he makes so many mistakes that totally dilute the fact that he can block shots, right? And which is why he's a league minimum player right now, despite his career numbers. I mean, that's pretty telling. But anyway, there's a rating site called 538 Sports. You can use that. You can use NBA.com. There's other ones as well. They pretty much correlate with each other. You can take some of this with a grain of salt all you want. The graphics up there right now for Portland. But as you can see, it shows their overall Raptor score. The Raptor score is basically each player's basically analytics score for offense and defense, and then you have the total. So if you look at each team's Raptor scores, and then you look at the ratings in the league, they correlate. So the top defensive teams with top defensive ratings, they have the most players that you would see in blue here as plus defensive players, and vice versa with the worst defensive team. So here's the Blazers, 29th ranked. And as you can see, of their core players, they have 6 players in the minus from 1.4 for Powell on down to 5.1 for Simons. And you see Lillard's in there at 3.8. Lillard for much of the season was over 5, so he's gotten better. Not on there is Trent because he got traded for Powell. He's a minus 2.5. So all this talk about Trent being a great defender, all this kind of stuff, according to analytics, that not necessarily still great and not better than McCollum. I've always found it fascinating all season that McCollum has been right around 0 and plus 0.1. But if you look at this, you cannot tell me how you can produce a good defense with this group of guys. Your backcourt, when you had Trent playing for McCollum, that's a minus 2.4 swing from McCollum to Trent in those minutes. And then you're playing Simons in place of Trent for the backup guard minutes. And look at Simons. Then you look at Lillard. That's 4 guys. That's 3 guys, Trent, Simons, and Lillard, who as of now, they were worse then. Because at one point, Simons was like a minus 6 as well. but that's a combined minus 10 in your backcourt. And then you had Cantor playing for Nurkic, who missed 33 games, 32 during the wrist being broke. I'm trying to lean here to see this. Cantor's a minus 2.4. You see Nurkic at plus 3.9. So it's not just that you lose a plus 3.9. It's that then you're going to a guy who's a minus 2.4. That's a 6.1 swing. So how are you going to have a good defense with minus players on defense on the perimeter, and then your center's a minus player? I don't care who you are coaching that team. How are you supposed to produce a really good defense? Now, you see Covington and Jones are plus defenders. Thank God they signed those two guys, right? Because where would they be? They'd be starting Melo at a minus 0.2. Hood was a minus 1.4. They'd have all minuses in the starting lineup with Nurkic out and McCollum out had they not signed Covington and Jones. So now let's look at a few other teams so you can see a comparison. Let's call up Miami. Miami is sixth. Wait, sorry, is Utah next? Whichever one you have next, throw it up there, and I'll find the right one. Okay, yeah, Utah. So Utah is fourth in defense. Okay, and you see all the pluses there? You see all the guys? Gobert, a 7.6. So Gobert versus Cantor.
Let me pause real quick right here.
Go ahead.
And this is when I look at this and I see the Blazers, two things come to mind. At the top here, you have Rudy Gobert, who is a perennial first-team all-defensive guy and an all-league center. But they have also had Rudy Gobert all season. And the statistics are impacted by when you have your best defensive players for all season. And so, you know,
the overall ratings are.
Correct. Sorry, yeah.
Not individual players, right. The team ratings, right.
And so with Gobert doing what he does, he obviously makes everybody else better. And I'm not suggesting that Nurkic is as good defensively as Gobert, because he's not, but he's a plus defender, and he is the anchor of the Blazers defense.
Right.
They haven't had him all season. So that's what's going to make their numbers be even worse than they might normally be. And so that is the difference from them being 29th in the league in defense and say 13, 15, maybe not that high. Okay, not that high. I should say I was being optimistic. We'll say 15 to 17. But even if they're 15 to 17, that's take.
Yeah, you would take that.
That's probably 5 wins. I mean, I don't know. It's a few wins, and so that is you see all this green for people watching on the video right here. With this is a byproduct of a healthy team with a healthy Gobert, and you see all that pink that we saw before, all the red. Somewhat of a byproduct of not having your best interior defender. Sorry for interrupting.
No, you're 100% right. That's why I was making the point that when you go from Nurkic to Cantor, that's a huge drop off from a plus 4 guy to a minus 2.5 guy. I mean, that's huge because he's not able to back up those guys or really be a plus defender against other teams' good bigs. And so that only hurts the fact that you already have a weak perimeter defense as it is. But you look at Mike Conley as a plus 3.9 on defense. And then Lillard's a minus 3 point whatever. So that's a 7-point swing from their point guard to the Blazers point guard on defense. And then you look at everybody else, even when you get down to Ingles and Clarkson, even Bogdanovich is only a minus 1.8, which would make him like the 5th best defender on the Blazers. Mitchell's a minus 2.1. He needs to get his act together, but he's the only, there's only 2 really weak links in that defense. And they're anchored by, the best defensive big man in the league. But there's a correlation there where, you can't tell me that the personnel with the Blazers and the injuries have not impacted this team defensively. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. This one might be Miami. Okay, so I just went Miami 6th in defensive rating. You see a little less blue than Utah. But again, you don't see a dramatic – look at the bottom, 0.7, 0.9. You're not seeing 3 point whatever, or 5 point whatever, or 2 point whatever. You're seeing – not even a full minus 0.1 defensive ratings. And then you see their anchor Butler's a 3.1, Bam's a plus 2.2. They're just better balanced out defensively. So now they're 6th. So now let's go to the middle of the pack. Let's go to Dallas. So here's the Dallas Mavericks. They are 15th defensive rating. So now you see someone like a Redick. He's coming off the bench at a minus 2.2. You see Luka Doncic is a negative defender, but he's a minus 1.4, not a minus 4 or minus 5. And then you go on up and you still have some balance in blue at the top. So you're not getting guys out there who are just killing you. They're not great. They're average. And guess what? They're ranked 15th in defensive rating, which is average. So now let's look at some teams that are down there with the Blazers in the bottom 3 or 4 in the league, starting with the Minnesota Timberwolves, who I think are last. Look at all that red at the bottom. Now, D'Angelo Russell's out for the season, but at minus 4.2. Anthony Edwards, who's probably going to be rookie of the year with LaMelo Ball hurt, is a minus 3.5. He's even a minus offensively. You see Beasley, who starts minus 2.2. And then they don't really have much of an anchor at the top. They just got some guys that, aren't really household names or impact players who are in the pluses. And their star, Karl Anthony Towns, is a slightly negative defender. But you can see this looks closer to what the Blazers are. No one's running around saying the T-Wolves should be a great defense, right?
By the way, how about my man Anthony Edwards not knowing who A-Rod is and admitting it publicly when that guy's about to be your owner?
You know what, though? I don't blame him. He's 19. Why would he know who A-Rod is?
Well, don't you know history of sports? I could name some guy that didn't play,
not if you
played 30 years ago.
Not if you don't follow that sport. You and I could, because we're 40 and 50 and we cover this stuff for a living.
Yeah.
He didn't grow up caring about baseball. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. Okay.
Anyway.
And then our last one is the Kings. And I like this one because the Kings are really good at the guard position with De'Aaron Fox, Tyrese Halliburton, and Buddy Hield, who are really good offensively. But, look at their defensive numbers. Minus 2.3, minus 2.4, minus 2.9 for that trio. They don't really have an anchor. Whiteside is playing a plus 0.2 this year, which, is probably better than it was last year with the Blazers. But they don't, their best defender is DeLon Wright, 2+. And so their best players that start, Bagley, Hield, Halliburton, and Fox, and Glenn Robinson plays a lot. They're all negative defenders. Is anyone running around saying that the Sacramento Kings have no excuse to be a bad defense? I've never heard anyone say that, but they have the same player situation that the Blazers have. Now, Lillard, a lot of people never want to talk about Lillard's defense, and Lillard has been better as of late in terms of seasons. And I actually believe that one of the reasons why he's down off defensively this year is because he has been fighting injuries the entire season. First, it was that rib thing. Remember that rib cartilage thing he got, which limited his movement, caused him to miss the Philly game. And then the guy gets knee-to-knee contact like every other game. Dwight James last night asked him, I laughed out loud when he said, he's like, I don't know if there's a stat for the most need situations in a season, but you would have to be close to the record. And I counted, I think, 7 or 8 times he's banged knees this season. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that his body has been really banged up this season. So that's going to impact you defensively, chasing around other small guards. But the bottom line is your best player is a severe negative defensive player. For players who've played over 800 minutes, he ranks next to last. For players who have played 500 minutes, I think it was like 299 players who have played over 500 minutes. He ranks like 297th in defensive rating. So if you're,
and he's played almost all season without Nurkic.
Right,
and
100%.
if you go back, and we're not going to go back, but if one thing that you didn't point out on the Utah breakdown was the person who was listed last. I believe it was a minus 3.8 or a minus 2.8 was Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, I mentioned it.
And you did? Okay, so
together.
but you can still see a team can work around, a superstar who is not a definitive two-way player.
Right. If the
because
rest of the
that
team,
superstar gives you so much, right? And so, but you can't do that if you don't have your Robin, and then you don't have your Incredible Hulk or whatever. Right. He's not in the Batman universe, but whatever. Let's mix metaphors here for superhero movies. Point 100%. Is, you don't have Nurkic, what are you going to do? Because as you pointed out, you're replacing him with Cantor, who for all he's given you is not giving you what you need on that end. Right.
And you give Lillard a break. He was minus 1.8 last year. The year before that, he was a minus 0.8 in 2017-18. Basically his breakout year, he was a minus 0.1. So he's been a lot better. That's why I give him the benefit of the doubt on the injury front. But anyway, my point is, people can say all they want about strategy and what they could do differently and mixing up coverages and all that kind of stuff. And Powell talked about how at Toronto, everyone bought into defense. It was something that they really cared about. And they did do a lot of different schemes. They employed a lot of different schemes. But the fact that he talked about everyone's bought in, we can't believe that everyone on this team has bought in because they're always talking about how they're trying to get on the same page.
Well, not only that, he didn't mention that they had one of the game's best defensive players in Kawhi Leonard, too. Like, again, back to the personnel issue.
Well, yeah, in 2019, but even last year they were top 5. But Toronto was. But even the year before Toronto got Kawhi, they were top 5. This year, for all the problems they've had, they're 12th. Mm-hmm. So I do think the attitude of the team and the players and everyone committing to it, and then you have to have the ability. I mean, let's face it. CJ is not a super athletic, quick, big guy. And he's going to be matched up against who most of the time? Bigger, stronger 2 guards, just like with Jaylen Brown. So the fact that he's improved defensively as much as he had, he's only let's say plus 0.1. I think it's a testament to his commitment to probably playing better defense. But I don't know if they're getting that from everyone else. And then you factor in, like you've talked about and I talked about, losing your anchor, Nurkic, for 33 games, replacing him with a negative defender in Cantor. And then Trent was a negative defender. Simon's a negative defender. Carmelo's a negative defender. All that adds up to a situation where, I'm sorry, you're not going to be a good defensive team. And I don't want to hear about Covington and Jones. Covington and Jones are good. They're not turn the defense around guys. If they were,
they're pieces. They're pieces to a
good puzzle.
And
exactly.
They're strong.
They're strong, but they're not. Yeah. Okay, we're coming in here. They're not like, to make a football analogy. They're not like adding, Ray Lewis or Brian Urlacher to the middle of your defense. He can change your entire defense. Or when Seattle added Adams at safety, so guys like that. They're not that kind of guy. They're a good linebacker who's a 75, 80 rating, who's going to help your defense get better, but not going to change your last place defense and make them great. They're just not that. So anyway,
if we're gonna mix football metaphors in here, we at least got to get some Florida State. Let's go, Derek Brooks here.
I met Derek Brooks, by the way.
Good guy, yeah.
Yeah, he was awesome. So anyway, that's just my little spiel on this, because I'm not saying Stotts is a great defensive coach. I haven't covered him enough to make that assessment, but I do know that they do not have great defensive personnel as compared to the top defenses in the NBA based on analytics.
All right. I think we've exhausted another defensive conversation. Whew. So we shall move on to you had mentioned Dame at length there and that. And, he continues to draw attention in the MVP chase. At some point this year, he was drawing attention way too early. But here we are now with about a month or so left in the season. And it's time to, legitimately check in there. And I guess, with him in the thick of the race most of this season, always the chatter and the debate about him, with everything going on with the Blazers, where they're at against teams, where they're at defensively, where they're at plummeting in the standings, is this hurting his MVP chances?
Oh, I think it definitely is, especially if Jokic continues doing what he's doing, and without Jamal Murray, if they're able to stay in the top 4. We'll see when the Lakers get LeBron and Davis back. I think when they're not. Yeah, neither one's back. Durant came back. That's right. If both those guys come back, I think the Lakers will make a run to get into the top 4. I think they want home court advantage probably in the first round, but we'll see what Denver can do. I still think Luka Doncic, if he can get his team to keep climbing, I think he's going to be a threat. And then we'll see what happens with Embiid. He's back. He missed a lot of time though, so it's still there for Lillard, but. The month of April has not been kind to him. The month of April started with the Milwaukee game. He's shooting 38.5% from the field, averaging only 21 points. When on the season, I think he's averaging 29. He was at 30 at one point. So he's having a really bad month. He did have 28 against Boston, though. 9 of 23 shooting, though, however. I think there's no doubt. If he continues this way for the month of April and they keep losing to good teams, if I'm an MVP voter, I'm like, okay, so Lillard looked like an MVP when they played the weak teams. He carried that team with CJ out. They went 14-10, which was 14-11, which was awesome. They didn't have Nurkic either, but now Nurkic is back and McCollum is back. His numbers are coming way down. Teams are trapping him, taking him out of games. He's not able to combat that, which isn't all his fault, and he's shooting poorly. How do I vote him MVP over someone else who has better numbers and continues to win? I just don't see how he is not hurting himself, or the team is. It's probably the team's fault as well, but that he's not being hurt right now in terms of the MVP race.
Yeah, a couple things. I have always maintained.
Yeah, Fentress, a couple things. Go ahead.
I've always maintained that an MVP should be tied to his team's success in large part. And so if the Blazers fall down to 7th or 8th in the West, then it's going to be a hard sell for him to be an MVP. And he also, I should say, to the point that he's dipped a little bit. We are approaching that point where I think what you're going to see, Aaron, is Dame kind of go from here to here. I think he's on the verge of kind of clicking back into Dame mode, and so I would keep an eye out for that for some big games coming forward. Now, unless teams do the Miami, take him completely out of the game, then what are you going to do in that situation? But so that'll be interesting to see how he kind of responds to that. But there are a couple things in his favor. On the Denver front, what happens now that Jamal Murray is out, which, by the way, just brutal, because not only is it a brutal injury for them, and I know Blazers fans for some reason hate Denver. Maybe it's the division thing or whatever, but fun team to watch, just done. And he's not only done this year, he's going to miss almost all of next year because of the COVID schedule. And it's just, man, you hate to see that. But back on point, it's how does Jokic respond if he maintains Denver where it is without Murray, and he continues to produce otherworldly stats or even ramps up his production? Boy, it's going to be hard to overlook him. You've got Embiid there, in the mix. But one thing that is working in Dame's favor is if Jokic tapers off and Denver falls back because Murray of the Murray injury, that combined with all these other guys who are kind of in the mix have missed a lot of games, have either sat out for load management or, been hurt, like Anthony Davis and LeBron, which obviously knocks them down. So, by not default, but just by a confluence of events, then, that elevates him up. And so I still think he's right there. It's all on his team right now to decide how they're going to play, over these last 18 games. If they go on a run and play well, he's right in the thick of things. If it's going the way it's been going the last couple of weeks, then he's going to fall further back, plain and simple.
Yeah, I think of the players still involved, I think we're going to see one or two guys just have like a 2 or 3 week stretch where they just go bananas. And then everyone's like, okay, that's the guy. And
it could be Dame.
And it could absolutely be Damian, 100%.
Yeah.
And let me ask you this. You cover this team for a long time. They haven't won a championship since 77. Doesn't look like they're going to be champions this year. The last MVP was Walton, 78. Drexler finished second in 92. How huge would it be for the sports landscape in this town, in this state, even outside of the NBA, hardcore fans, for Damian Lillard to win an MVP in a league where there's the marquee stars control the league? They change teams. They hook up with their boys. You know what I mean? They're usually, other than Curry, usually the MVPs are, superhuman guys, 6'6" to 6'10" or 11, 7 foot. To have a 6'2" guard out of Weber State come to Portland, commit to Portland, sign an extension to stay in Portland, and win MVP. How huge would that be?
Well, I think it would be important for a couple reasons. One, to your point, it would reinforce the idea that you don't need to leave any market and go sync up with other stars to accomplish all the individual things that you want to accomplish, right? It would reinforce that you can be your own man and establish your own, identity and brand and all that stuff where you are and where you were kind of raised, so to speak. And also, I think it would be important for the whole loyalty, narrative, that this is a guy who has stayed loyal to Portland, who remains loyal to Portland, who says if it were up to him, he would retire, a Blazers player. He wants to be the best Blazer of all time. We've heard other guys say that and then 6 months later leave town. And, those guys didn't achieve any more individual or team success when they left town. And so, it would just both reward and reinforce just that school of thought that that's kind of anti 21st century or anti new era basketball in the LeBron James kind of era. You don't need to leave to accomplish everything you want to. And it's a guy who for years who's kind of brazenly put it out there saying, yeah, I think I am an MVP and I should be in the conversation, which a lot of times guys are hesitant to do. So, kind of for all those reasons, it would be huge for the franchise. It would be, memorable and important for him. But it would also be something else for Blazers fans to celebrate too. You've seen how crazy this town gets when the team is winning, and that Western Conference Finals run a couple of years was so incredible. Something like that, I think, is just another kind of carrot for them to enjoy.
I would liken it to when Mario to win the Heisman. Oregon has flirted with a national title, but hasn't gotten one. I don't see one on the horizon. We'll see. If Ty Thompson is the real deal, maybe they can get one, with all the other talent they've recruited. But for Mario to get the first Heisman ever was just huge for Oregon, not ever. I mean, Oregon State has a Heisman. And I think Dame getting, an MVP in lieu of a championship, which may or may not ever happen, I think would be equally as huge for the Blazers franchise and for Blazer Nation.
Mm-hmm.
Could you imagine that? I mean, how many Lillard MVP T-shirts they would sell?
Roughly 1 trillion.
All right. Anything else you want to add? They have Spurs Friday, Charlotte. Too bad they're not playing LaMelo. I'm so bummed he broke his wrist. But they got the 2 games coming up this weekend. Then they come back home. What do you think is going to happen this weekend? Is it imperative that they win 2 or just at least get 1?
Man, you got to start with 1. You got to start with 1, but it would be nice to get 2 with the Clippers and Denver on the horizon. And then, looking a little further, just a huge 3 and 4 game stretch against Memphis. And it's, it's the byproduct of that COVID, cancellation earlier in the year that they even faced them 3 times in 4 games at an important stretch. But they've been playing better. Blazers haven't. So that's if you're not going to hang with those teams above you, you better beat those winning teams below you, man, or else sayonara.
I mean, listen to this. So they got Spurs, Charlotte, then they come home for Clippers, Denver, Grizzlies, a reprieve sort of with Indiana, who's kind of mailed it in, Memphis, again, at Memphis, and then at Brooklyn, at Boston, at Atlanta. Holy moly. That is wicked. I mean, and then you go to Cleveland, which, okay, you should win that game. But then you come home with Lakers, Spurs, Houston, Utah, Phoenix, Denver. My goodness. And you still think they'll be above 500 these last 25 games?
Ooh, they have not helped my cause.
Now.
They have not helped my cause so far, man. What are they? They lost 5 of 7 or 6 of 7 or something like that. Man, they're killing me. They're killing me. And I don't usually care if they win or lose, but if I'm gonna make predictions, I gotta back it up.
You need them to step up in your favor, right?
It's not looking good. Let's just say that. Let's leave it at that.
All right, that's it for the Blazer Focus podcast, brought to you by Bi-Mart and Fred Meyer. I'm Aaron Fentress. He is Joe Freeman, and we are signing off until next time.
Be safe out there and go get vaccinated if you have a chance, folks.
Then you can hang out with us.
Hey-o!